The forest products industry has been a major contributor to the Upper Michigan economy for most of our modern history. But how is the industry doing today, and what might the future hold? We'll discuss those questions this morning, starting right now.
From TV6, this is The Ryan Report. Here's your host, Don Ryan.
Well, Dr. Mark Rudnicki is a professor in the School of Forest Resources and Environmental Science at Michigan Technological University. Mark has been developing forest biomaterials programs at MTU and working to coordinate statewide efforts to bolster Michigan's innovation and competitiveness in forest biomaterials. He also serves as the volunteer executive director of the Michigan Forest Biomaterials Institute. Dr. Rudnicki, welcome to the Ryan Report.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me, Don.
Nice to have you with us. I do really want to get to that biomaterials. I think that's right. Kind of the key to our subject today, but a little more about you first. Where did Mark Rudnicki start life?
I grew up in Sterling Heights, Michigan.
Okay.
So that's a suburb of Detroit. And but we spent a lot of time as a family coming up to the UP, and we owned some property in Gaylord, so that's really where I started my love of the forest and forestry.
And so you kind of knew when you went to school that you were going to be involved in the in forestry?
Yeah, in forestry for sure, but I didn't have a whole lot of plans. I sort of made my way as I went.
And you started at Colorado State, I believe?
That's true. I did my undergrad at Colorado State, and I did my master's at Michigan Tech, and then I went to Canada for my PhD and postdoc.
And you also did some other university work before you came here?
That's also right. My first job was at the University of Alaska, and I was there for a short while, and then I spent 10 years at the University of Connecticut.
Okay. Just kind of a general overview. What's the state of the Michigan forest industry today?
I think the industry is doing well. It usually does well when the economy is doing well, and so I think it's doing pretty good, but I think there's certainly room for improvement.
What are the challenges facing the industry?
I think still one of these persistent challenges is people's perception of the industry and how the industry either does or doesn't take care of the forest. So people still have a negative feeling about cutting trees that is really hard to get past.
Even though, as I understand it, our forest resources are growing, not shrinking. Is that correct?
They are, yeah. We cut only twice as many trees. We have twice as much growth as we harvest.
Okay, and so that's a pretty consistent factor through the years.
Well, no, it varies up and down, but okay. Yeah, right now it's been that way for quite some time. But of course, that varies across Michigan too.
What is the economic impact of logging on the not logging, but the forest industry on the state of Michigan?
Well, the entire forest products industry, including forestry and forest products, has about a $20 billion impact on the state.
Okay.
And I think most of those jobs are in manufacturing, and most of those jobs are downstate. But I think the biggest proportion or the biggest economic impact is in northern Michigan.
Okay. The forests in Michigan, large portions of the forest, and especially in the Upper Peninsula, are owned by the federal government or state government. And there have been some issues in the past about logging on federal lands. Are we logging all that we should be in those areas?
Well, I think last I heard, according to the Forest Service's own schedule of logging, they're behind. But there's some new things happening. The Good Neighbor Authority is a partnership between the feds and the state of Michigan, where the state does some of the operations and pulls out some of that timber, puts it on the market. So those harvests are increasing.
Are we logging the state lands as we should be? Do the state have sound policies for that?
I believe they do. Yeah.
Okay. One of the real issues, for Upper Michigan certainly, has been: are we making the best use of these resources for our own economy?
And that's really, we could get more value from the trees, from our forests. We're doing okay with that, but we're seeing things happen across the country and especially around the world where people are being more innovative with forest products and getting more value from each tree.
And we do, I think, still ship a large percentage of our timber out of the Upper Peninsula.
We do. Well, we don't consume a lot. We don't have a lot of people in the UP, but we could certainly add more value to the forest products, to that timber that we do harvest. A lot of it is set out either in raw logs or lightly processed, and we could do a lot more.
We do, of course, have a paper industry, which has gotten smaller. That's still an important part of the UP economy.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
And we do have some sawmills, ranging from the smaller sawmills to operations like potlatch
right
in this area. Can those industries be more productive, or are they doing pretty much what they can do?
Well, I don't know. They could be more competitive. They can always be more competitive. There's always things you could try to do better. And that's one of the things we've engaged in the paper industry, with Verso in particular, because they have a waste byproduct called lignin, and we're helping them find new innovative solutions to add value to that byproduct. And that's part of what the MIFB is, but we'll get to that.
Okay. Well, we'll actually get to that in just a minute. We'll come back and talk about it. But first of all, tell us, what is MIFB?
MIFB is the Michigan Forest Biomaterials Institute.
Okay.
And it was officially formed as a nonprofit back in 2016. And even though I work for Michigan Tech, it's important to know that MIFB is not an institute at Michigan Tech. It's an independent nonprofit. And we have a board of directors from across the state of Michigan. And it also involves other major universities, I believe. It does. Okay. So we have representatives from 3 state agencies, 3 universities, and private industry. Okay. So Michigan State University and Fair State join Michigan Tech on there. Okay, we'll come back and talk more about what it does in just a minute. Back with more on the Ryan Report after this break. Our guest this morning is Dr. Mark Rudnicki from Michigan Tech University. Also involved with an organization called MIFB, which is the Michigan Forest Biomaterials Institute. We were just talking about that. Right. This is pretty exciting stuff, isn't it? We traditionally have thought that we can use trees for lumber, paper, and that's pretty much it. And now we're looking at a lot of different opportunities, aren't we? Yeah, we really are. I think there's a tremendous amount of new products that are coming out around the world. We're seeing probably the leaders in that in the Nordic countries, Finland and Sweden, but even Germany and France and Italy. A lot of the European countries are investing a lot in research and developing some amazing new technologies and products. And for the benefit of our audience, many products that are turned out today are really fossil-based. They're petroleum-type products, right. And many of those products could be produced, or similar products, using wood fiber. Yeah, there's a pretty famous saying going around that anything you can make from oil, you can make from wood. And is that true? Well, that's what all the chemists and chemical engineers tell me. So I believe it is. Yes. What are the issues to standing in the way of making that happen? Because, well, just going back to that real quick, if you think about it, that's all oil is plants that have been underground for a long, long time. Right. So you're dealing with basically the same building blocks. So and we're talking, just so people get an idea of what it is. Looking at what they're doing in Europe, for example, plastic spoons could be produced with wood fiber. Plastic straws, just all kinds of things. Bio-based plastics is one. Adhesives, coatings, all sorts of new materials as well. There's a thing that was invented in the U.S. called superwood. It's a condensed wood that is super strong and lightweight and looks to be replacing perhaps lots of materials. But getting those products to market and fully developed it's not just as easy as saying, oh, let's make a plastic fork out of wood fiber. What has to be done? Yeah, that's the really big challenge for certain, and one of the places that I've been looking at pretty closely because of their success in this area is Finland. In Finland, not only do they invest a lot in the research, but they expect things to be brought to market. And so they've built around that a whole business ecosystem, and to really move things from the research phase into the market. So the taxpayers get the benefit as quickly as possible instead of just doing the research, which, so it's a very directed research. Is the money available for the research in this country, or is that an issue? Not so much in wood products, no. That's really dropped off lately, and it really hasn't rebounded. One of the reasons for that is the structure of the forest industry has changed over the years with the breaking up of vertically integrated companies. Used to be the company owned the land and the mill and the trucks and perhaps even the retail. And so that is broken up. So now all the lands are held by basically real estate companies, right? TMOs and REITs. And so that is, and so they no longer see the benefit of putting the research dollars in because they're not on the other end of the supply chain or the value chain.
Is that affecting, I know there were some big landowners in the UP, is that affecting the UP forests?
I think it is. Well, it's affecting our forests, it's affecting forests across the U.S. You know, there's a recent statistic, industry in the U.S. typically invests 2 to 3% of their gross product back into research. That is an average number across all industries. Forest products industry invests about 0.5% back into research. So it's not a good situation, right?
Companies today tend to be very, very narrowly focused. And as you mentioned already, the forest industry has certainly changed. They've focused on their products and gotten out of land ownership and all the rest of it. And so are they part of this revolution? I mean, are they willing to see other opportunities? If you manufacture paper today, that you could manufacture something else tomorrow?
I think they're starting to get that picture. You know, I think a local company in the UP, JM Longyear, has been on our MIFB board and is also, I think, sees that picture and sees the potential there. And so, yeah, we see some of the companies engaging with us and saying, yeah, this could be really big part of the future.
Is this still something, though, where, for example, your organization is taking the lead and trying to bring more people into the fold?
Right, and that's where MIFB is the big emphasis of what we're trying to do. So we hold events, conferences, workshops to engage companies, engage researchers, bring those two folks together with government to say, okay, how do we get this off the ground? But I think the other thing that we're really sort of pushing or putting this in a larger context of the bioeconomy, right? So we could talk about forest products, but we're talking also about what can they do for the broader public. So why should someone in Chicago or Detroit be interested in a bio-based product versus an oil-based product? And that's because they're very concerned about climate change and our changing world. And so the forest products industry, I think, has a ready-made solution. Trees are half carbon, and so we have a very low carbon alternative to oil. And so I think there's a huge opportunity there, but it can't just be sort of pushing forest products. It has to be really talking about the whole forest bioeconomy. And we've been doing that. Also, we've got a meeting coming up in February in Midland. And so we're engaging Michigan's big chemical companies, the auto industry, the furniture companies. So we're bringing all these sectors together to raise their awareness of what can Michigan's forests bring to the table.
Okay. We'll follow up on that in just a couple of minutes. Back with more on today's show after we take this 2-minute break. Again, our guest this morning is Mark Rudnicki from the Forestry Department at Michigan Tech University, also involved with the
MIFB.
MIFB, yes.
Yep.
You know, as you were saying, that we've kind of looked at this more from an economic angle, but there certainly are strong environmental reasons here too, and there's a great concern in this country now about what do we do with all these plastic throwaway items that are filling our landfills and maybe our oceans as well.
Right. No, the microplastics is a big problem, and the plastics in the ocean. But I want to go back to what you started with, and to make this work, it has to be both. It has to be an economic benefit and an environmental benefit, right? Because resources are limited, and we have to use renewable resources. We can't just keep using oil, right? Because there's real problems with it. And the biodegradable nature, that's something that is very good to, or almost inherent in wood products. And I think that's one of the things that we saw. We just in October, we had a summit of Finnish businesses that we invited to Houghton. And it was a delegation from Business Finland, which is their federal economic development agency. And they brought over 8 businesses, and we learned about a lot directly about a lot of what their cutting edge new products are, and they're basically traveling the world selling those products and those technologies around. So we want to learn what kind of connections could we make with them.
How far down this road are they?
Oh, very far down the road.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, do you get American companies coming to your conferences that could be the potential developers of the future for the United States economy?
They're starting to. I think one of the things that Finland did and does that we're going to have to also look at is, is new startups, is new innovators and entrepreneurs that are small and lean and hungry for something new, right? It's not necessarily the big established industries that are going to do this. And some may dabble in it, but a lot of the growth has come from new startups in this area. So sometimes it's spin-outs from universities or spin-outs from companies.
Michigan, the MTech Smart Zone in the Copper Country, associated with Michigan Tech, has done some great things. Probably not in the forest industry yet.
Oh no, that's not true. In fact, the Finland Summit was a really good partnership between MIFB and the MTech Smart Zone. And I should also talk at least briefly about the FinZone, which is an economic landing pad area that they created for Finnish businesses. And it's Finnish businesses of any stripe, but we've really been partnering and emphasizing the bioeconomy, because that's really strong in the Finnish economy as well. And through that partnership between MIFB and our strength in the forest biomaterials, the forest bioeconomy, and the FinZone's strength in startups and business incubation, we were able to attract this delegation from Finland. So it was a really interesting partnership, and it really bore fruit.
As we look at what's going on in Upper Michigan, historically, as we said, we tend to ship a lot of our trees out of here. The paper industry was one that kept some of those trees here anyway, to be used here and turned into manufacturing and creating jobs. This has the potential to do the same thing, doesn't it? Different products, not paper, but...
Yeah, in fact, the whole concept of what you do with once you pulp a tree, right? So once you pulp the tree, you've done the sort of heavy lifting of breaking it down. Now, building it back up into other products, the sky's the limit there, right? And so the first low-hanging fruit is to talk with Verso about what's their byproducts. So one of the major byproducts when you make paper is black liquor, which is mostly lignin. So what can we do with lignin? And so we had actually a forum down in Iron Mountain hosted by MIFB, and we brought researchers from across the state to tour Verso and talk with them and learn, okay, well, what are your problems and how can we bring these two sides together? And from that emerged a couple of pilot projects. One went to Michigan State and one went to Michigan Tech. And so we're engaging that, and so MIFB's the sort of facilitator of all this, right? And that's our role.
And we'll have to find out more about how that goes in a future discussion. Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you.
I'll be back with some more thoughts for you in just a couple of minutes. Well, in the recent election, Michigan selected Gretchen Whitmer to be the state's 49th governor. Now, there's a little fact you should know about that number, but I'll get to that in a minute, because this morning I have a little trivia quiz for you. The first question is, who was Michigan's longest-serving governor? The answer is William Milliken. He served from 1969 to 1982. And here's a related question. How did Milliken first become governor? The answer? He was the lieutenant governor under George Romney and became governor when Romney resigned near the end of his term to become Secretary of Housing and Urban Development in the Nixon administration. Milliken was then elected to several terms. The next question is, who was the longest-serving Democrat in the governor's office in Michigan? The answer? G. Menon Williams, who served from 1949 to 1960. And here's a fun question. What nickname was Governor Williams commonly known by? There's actually a clue in his name. If you guessed Soapy, you were right. The name came about because his grandfather was the founder of the Menon Company, which produced men's personal care products, including soap. Menon products can still be found on store shelves, but the company is now owned by Colgate-Palmolive. One more Menon Williams question: what important state office did he serve in later in his career? Well, he later became the Chief Justice of the Michigan Supreme Court. Here's another question for you. Who was the only Michigan governor to die in office? The answer is Frank D. Fitzgerald, and he is also a factor in that numbering twist I referred to a moment ago, because he is the only person to be elected to 2 separate terms. He was elected to be the state's 34th governor in 1935, but was defeated in his bid for re-election by Frank Murphy, who became the 35th. 2 years later, Fitzgerald was again elected, so he was actually the state's 34th and 36th governor. So with that knowledge, we know now that while Gretchen Whitmer is the 49th governor of Michigan, she is actually the 48th person to serve in that position. If that leaves you confused, it's not all that important. I have one final question for you. When was the last time a Michigan governor leaving office was succeeded by someone from his own party? For that answer, we go back to our first question, because the last time that happened is when Bill Milliken replaced George Romney. Here's the way it's gone since then. Milliken, a Republican, was replaced by Democrat James Blanchard, who was replaced by Republican John Engler, who was replaced by Democrat Jennifer Granholm, who was replaced by Republican Rick Snyder, who was going to be replaced by Democrat Gretchen Whitmer. I'm not sure what that says about our state. I'll leave you to ponder that and make your own conclusion, and I'll be back in a minute. Well, the Today Show is waiting in the wings, so it's time for us to step aside. There is time to remind you that this show is available on the internet at uppermichigansource.com. You can also find the latest news at that same address. There are some interesting possibilities with great potential for Michigan's forest products industry in the future, and I want to thank MTU Professor Mark Nicky for joining us this morning to share that story. Also glad you could join us. Let's get together again next Sunday morning.